Welcome to our webinar today. I'm your host, Caroline Hill. I'm the editor of Legal IT Insider, and in our webinar, we're going to be going through an AI masterclass with NetDocuments. So as you know, in 2025, legal work is more complex and fast-paced than ever. And while AI, automation and integration offer powerful solutions, many firms are still struggling to implement the right technology. And this is a very practical, strategy-focused masterclass. We'll be walking through 5 ways that firms can work smarter, not harder, using insights from the real-world use cases that NetDocuments are coming across in their experience, and also through what they call their 2025 Smart Firm checklist. So my speakers today, so one of them will be more than familiar. We've spoken before. Jennifer Poon is a former corporate associate at Simpson Thatcher and subsequently litigation counsel at Aiken Gump. So she's seen both sides of the coin. She brings very much the practice angle to our conversation today. She's been with NetDocuments since 2024, advising on the development and implementation of Gen AI tools. Hi, Jen.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. It feels like you've been at NetDocuments longer than that. I feel like it's been a long time in a good way.
The pace at which everything moves makes it seem like I've been here longer than a year, but it's just past now.
Yeah. And then so we've also got, so bringing a product lens is NetDocuments Director of Product Marketing, Michael Owen Hill, who cut his legal tech product teeth at Thomson Reuters as product manager for Find Law, and then subsequent products including Practical Law, and then Thomson Reuters Practice Management Solutions. So hi, Michael, nice to have you here.
It's good to see you.
You've been with NetDocs now 3 years.
Oh, I think that's right. Yes, 3.
3 years, yeah. So great to have those different perspectives. And as I mentioned, it's going to be very practical. So in terms of the agenda, so it would be very interactive. If you want to, and if you haven't enabled your chat, do please ask questions as we go. This is intended to be a masterclass, as we've already described. So for the 5 points that we are going to be covering include what we described as cut the toggle tax, so looking at smart integrations and streamlined workflows. We're going to be looking at AI collaboration / avoiding version chaos, which I'm really looking forward to. Automating repetitive legal work to free up time for higher value tasks, and deeper dive into how we're using AI potentially to do that. Searching smarter using semantic search. So Jen and I have talked about this a few times, but we're going to be looking at what semantic search is and is good for, what's next, and what's the holy grail. And then last but very much not least, talking about building security and governance directly into your workflow, looking at policies for data retention, permissioning in a bit more depth, and looking at client data, factors around client data. So we've got a really sort of packed conversation. Just tell me briefly before we sort of take a dive. So you talk about your 2025 Smart Firm checklist. Where does that come from? Is that something that you've sort of come up with for your experience, from your experience, or tell me a bit more about that, where it comes from?
And I know, Jen, you've contributed as well, so I'm interested in your perspective. I think, we have absorbed a lot of learning from our customers, from early adopters, from those who were like absolutely at the right time and right place to be able to onboard advanced technology, really drive significant return on investment very quickly. We've also worked with a lot of customers who are still kind of figuring it out. So I would say it's a kind of a distillation of a number of trends or areas of focus that seem predictive of success, some of which are directly related to AI technology, and some of which, frankly, are much broader. Like, for example, you mentioned, how do you make things more usable for people? That's obviously cuts across every type of technology that you use. But if we look at sort of success factors, areas where firms and departments are focusing that's predictive of success, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we talk about the toggle tax. I like the expression toggle tax. And so we talk about smart integrations with streamlined workflows. I think this is not a new conversation. For as long as I can remember, we've been talking about the issues of going from one system to another, and also for a long time, every vendor wants to be the hub. But now I think maybe we're seeing that more and more. There's more point systems. We're talking more and more about interoperability. Talk to me, very much from the work you're doing with firms and the experiences you're having, rather than sort of at any higher level, about what's working, perhaps how firms are removing the barriers to best effect, or what you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, so I can jump in on that one. So I think for lawyers, a lot of the pain point comes when you have to switch between multiple systems as you're trying to do work under high pressure, extremely fast environments. And so it's really annoying. Like, say you want to use ChatGPT to help you draft something. If you're working with confidential client documents, first you have to anonymize them, strip them of any personally identifying information, and make sure nothing's confidential in it, and then pop it into ChatGPT, and then like save the results back onto your DMS. So our thinking is that rather than having you go to AI, we would bring AI to you instead, where you work every day on your document management system. So when we say toggle tax, we mean we'll have AI right where you work so that you don't have to hop between systems. And though it might sound it sounds trivial, but actually you're saving like seconds and minutes off your workflow, which can really add up over time. And so, on NetDocs, you can invoke an assistant right on the DMS, select the documents you want to query, quickly interrogate them, get answers. You can also run apps directly on NetDocs, and then save the results directly back into the folder of your choice. And so when you do it that way, I think it makes your workflow much less frustrating and a lot more efficient.
And secure.
That's secure, right?
Right.
Michael can maybe talk to that, but with ChatGPT, everything you drop on there, the reason you have to make it anonymous is because it's public. OpenAI can then train its models on it, but at NetDocs, we've worked very hard to secure a zero data retention policy, an exemption, which means that everything you use through our systems is immediately scrubbed and is not subject to human or algorithmic oversight. So that security part of it makes these sorts of tools really appealing. So you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to worry about what your associates are doing.
Yeah. It's funny because sorry, Michael, I'll come to you, but these things go in waves, and I think now we're seeing an influx of point solutions in the way that we did a few years ago, right? So these things go kind of trends, perhaps AI Mark 1, loads of point solutions, and now we're seeing that again, which I do think it's presenting a number of different challenges. Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in on that particular point.
Yeah, I think there's an impact. I think quite rightly, any conversation around just streamlining workflow, streamlining user experience tends to focus on, incremental time saved, clicks, and just the sort of feel of having to overcome barriers to get your work done. I think what is often missed is the cognitive impact. I mean, I think if you look at, oh, well, let's reduce a couple of clicks and maybe that'll save someone 5 minutes a day. The impact cognitively to having to switch lanes, to having to wait, to having to, oh, wait, I need to log into that other system. And oh, what's the password again? Because I just had to change it on Monday morning. And why do I have to change my password so much? Like that mental process can be it can take a lot of energy, frankly. And I would say it's more the cognitive impact of the flow seems intuitive, things work the way that I, the user, anticipate them working. And it feels more like the system or the set of systems that are integrated are working alongside me, as opposed to me having to figure out which levers to pull, can really make a difference at the end of the day of whether I feel like, job well done, can't wait to start tomorrow, or whether I just feel absolutely exhausted. And that can impact quality of thinking. It can impact ability to detect and prevent errors in work product. I mean, there are some significant consequences of placing too much cognitive load on users. So it's just a slightly different lens that I often don't hear talked about in this conversation about how to deliver more seamless experiences for users.
I actually really love that focus. Oh, sorry, Jen, you jump in.
I was going to say that's a really good point. Even when you think about something as simple as like redlining, making that more accessible. The reason that I really liked NetDocs when I first used it was because with a right click, I could send things to Latera and produce like a PDF, a red line, like, and generate an email at the same time. And that was sort of seamless. Whereas with some other systems, you had to like go into a different program, connect to the VPN, select the documents, select the second document, then run it, and then save the PDF and Word file separately. And then if you're up against a deadline, like when I was a junior making SIG pages, or, when I was in litigation, just revising a brief until we had to submit it, you're doing that over and over again, like maybe 10 times in an hour. And that really adds up if you have to keep on toggling between different things to get it done. So yes, that cognitive load is painful and often what makes attorney or lawyers explode a little inside and become really, really cranky. Yeah.
I mean, it is painful. It's interesting. I talk about integration a lot, but not always actually in those terms and thinking about the human side. I've noticed more recently at conferences, there's very much a focus on the human being. I think we're quite overwhelmed generally. There's a lot of change going on in the market, and I think that I have to sort of make sure I emphasize the excitement and opportunity more, perhaps, but there's a huge amount of weight on everybody, right? And actually, I think that thinking about the human at the end of the tech and reminding ourselves of that is super important.
Absolutely.
If you're so fine, so do you think, just real quick before we move on to bit more about interoperability, but on the human side, do you think CTOs are factoring this in? So when you have a CTO evaluating 5 different solutions, do you think they're factoring that in? Do you think they're looking at the sort of psychology or not really?
I think it depends. I think it depends how close they are to lawyers on the ground who are doing the actual work. If so, then they might know to ask those questions and to evaluate a system from that perspective. But if it's more like they're playing more of a traditional IT role, then perhaps that's not really on their list. They're looking for things like security, which, we can check the box for, rather than, a good interface and like convenience to the user. Michael, what do you think?
No, absolutely. I think one of the extremely successful examples that springs to mind is driven by not just a focus on, how do we deliver maximum value? How do we deliver an experience that makes sense, that's non-disruptive, that's additive to the lawyer's days, but also driven from, there are disciplines, real tested, certified disciplines around how to design workflows to make them not just replicate old workflows, but how to make workflows more efficient, more rationalized, around user experience. That's again not just focused on the kind of gross how many clicks and is there a bunch of friction, but how to actually make those experiences intuitive. So I think those firms that are and departments that are leveraging those disciplines like UX, like business process analysis and design, are those that are kind of bringing the best of, in some ways, outside the legal vertical and applying it to very common sort of human challenges of, how do I navigate my day more efficiently with technology?
Mm-hmm. So what questions do you think anyone going out to market should be asking their vendor around interoperability? What are the questions you think that, if this is like you're being frank and sharing your inside knowledge, what do you think they should be asking as tech leaders? What do you think they need to understand in terms of the tech stack? This doesn't mean by this, I do not mean to sound patronizing. We've obviously got a huge bunch of smart people, but the whole point is trying to get your inside opinion, as it were.
So I'll jump in. I think it's somewhat specialized to the individual organization, but for some general guidance, I think there's a tendency to, in the conversation or even in demos, to focus on the new things that the user can do and less about what they don't have to do anymore. So some examples are oh, look, there's this fancy new interface where you can sort and, manipulate all of your emails. It's like, well, how about just manage them in a folder in Outlook the way you want to and let the sync happen on the back end so that the lawyer doesn't have to think about it? Or, oh, well, we do a lot of collaboration in teams. Well, how do we make it so that you can just like, oh, we need to go look at this document together. Cool. Well, just work in teams, open the document, like you're removing now I have to go over here and do this. It's great if there's an integration, but the quality of that integration and what it takes off the plate of the lawyer. Even something, this is not purely interoperability, but even something that we all know lawyers love doing, which is spending a few minutes appending metadata to a new document or a document every time they version it. And they're all very, very good at it and very, very thorough and consistent and accurate. Like when we think about utility, again, it's not just the click flow and comparing how many clicks, but like what's the stuff that we can take out of the attention and focus of the lawyer so that they can be focused on the more important things.
I like it. So being additive, so not additive, but we're actually saying, right, how do we eliminate? Yeah, I like it. So we in your list. So this also comes from your for anyone who's just joined. We're talking about NetDocs 2025 Smart Firm checklist. We've got the 5 points. So we've talked about the toggle tax and interoperability. Always struggle with that. Actually, one of the things we probably didn't touch on in that is the need for integration, interoperability with the agent-to-agent world. It's already here. People talk about it as if it's coming, but it's very much already here. I don't know if there's anything before we move on to version chaos, which I'm excited to talk about. Is there anything in the agent world that we need to talk about in terms of interoperability, or do you think we've kind of covered stuff?
No, I think you've made the point. There are a few things that perhaps we can say about expanding and the kind of general trajectory on expanding towards that agent future in maybe a couple of weeks after ILTCON North America. But suffice it to say that we're definitely, I think, collectively as an industry with key players. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge the role that Microsoft is playing in creating kind of a council of experts in various different verticals to enable Copilot and enable partners like us and many others to help to create that sort of clearinghouse. I think that the rapidly evolving sort of infrastructure to support agent-to-agent flows. You're right. I mean, it was if this conversation was a couple of months ago, I would have been like, okay, well, that's probably a 2026 conversation, but it's very much present. It's a little early to prognosticate exactly how that will shake out and what the sort of industry consensus and best practice will be. But just in conversations with our many partners, I know everyone is thinking and talking very openly about how we collaborate better to drive those seamless inter-platform workflows.
Yeah. Just to jump in there, I think you see this proliferation of different sorts of vendors in this space, and the instinct for a lot of them will to be like sort of build a moat, try not to let others sort of reach in. But at NetDocs, I think the philosophy has always been we started out as a cloud company, we're web-based, so it's been an open platform since the start, and I think that is still the philosophy going forward. And I do think that you have to be open to these integrations. But as Michael said, it's really about the quality of them that's going to determine which ones become the most useful and are the ones that lawyers return to consistently with their work. And so, we're putting a lot of thinking into that. And as Michael said, just stay tuned.
And maybe that's a good practical question for a CTO to ask and really dive in. I mean, often you'll see is like, do you have APIs? Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Let's take a look at them. Are they open? Are they well documented? What is your partnership program? Because I mean, it's one thing to say we have open APIs, and it's another thing to throw the door open to our platform and potentially a customer's extremely sensitive data to just any old person, which sometimes you find with newer entrants in the market who are desperate to kind of build that network. So like really understanding your provider's approach to supporting interoperability beyond just the technical, do you have APIs and are they performant?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the security aspect of it, and whether
Yeah,
there's like a controlled channel that's managed and thoughtful about how it
yeah,
happens, how easy it is to navigate from the user perspective, all that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to come on to talk a bit more about security at the end as well. I do feel like the clients are starting to drive this, and where vendors are not cooperating, they find, it's been fascinating, some of the recent developments in this space. But so fine. So in terms of so we're going to come on, and the second part of your 5-part plan is or what do you call it? Your 5-part, what is it you call it? Checklist. That's the word I was looking for. Is talking about versioning. So seamless AI-driven collaboration without version chaos. So why I mean, I've got lots of questions, but why does this feature next, as it were? Like, what is this something that everybody's struggling with and just reaps huge benefits? I actually love co-authoring myself, but anyway, but yeah, why is this number 2?
Well, version control, probably one of the least sexy but most important things that touch on lawyers' everyday lives. It's great when it works, and when it doesn't, it's horrible. And then you're spending all night trying to get back to a previous version that somebody else saved. And also, it's like, if the system isn't performant, then you're spending, minutes to hours every day trying to collaborate, and it's inefficient. But when you have co-authoring available as we do now, especially in our desktop version, then that just makes everything faster. But you have to do it in a manner where you're still preserving control over which comments get saved when, and which track changes get saved when. And so I'll let Michael talk more about it. But
Yeah, and it's another really good question for any organization to ask of a potential partner or provider. So beyond the sort of checklist of do you integrate, for example, with Word, but delving deep into that. I mean, the fact is there are, I think at last count, about 12 organizations in the world whose cloud storage is trusted and has kind of passed the many hurdles necessary to be treated with kind of with equal trust by applications like Word as OneDrive or SharePoint. And there's frankly not that many organizations that offer truly native integration with Office Online applications. Now, let's be frank. As someone who often, until very recently, has had to collaborate in Office Online, it is a suboptimal experience because the applications are different, and like especially PowerPoint, you don't know where the buttons are and things don't work the same. So I think it's really important to understand the degree to which any provider that is there to assist lawyers as they're drafting, in particular, like how well integrated is it? Does it feel native? Can you leverage Word's native open save functionality just as you would want to? And then also, what does co-authoring look like? And not just, okay, great, now I can open this document or invite any old person who I happen to have their email address to come in and co-author this document, but what additional functionality and guardrails is present within Word to ensure that access controls and ethical walls are respected. And that's the challenging bit, because Word is designed to be quite open for convenience, but sometimes convenience is the enemy of security and confidentiality.
So
yeah.
often.
And
Yeah,
also being able to track like who made which comment, so that, if a partner has made comments and a paralegal has made comments, which comments belong to who. Did I say that right? Yeah, because if you get
you did.
mixed up and like you're rewriting some of the partner stuff, keeping the paralegal's comments over theirs, then you might get in a bit of trouble. And so, how
Right.
sophisticated is that co-authoring tool? Can you roll it back to previous versions relatively easily? Can you roll a certain person's comments back relatively easily? All those are just sort of things to consider.
Yep.
I mean, that sounds like such a valid point. And is that super difficult to sort of to roll it back and see exactly who said what or not?
On some, yes, on some versions, like I was at an institution that did not use version control. We didn't. It was like all on SharePoint, and
Okay.
we would co-author and we would get to, a finalized brief faster, but sometimes you wouldn't know who put what comment on in, and that was the difficulty. You have to go back to somebody and ask, was that your comment or was that someone else's comment? And that can just, especially when you're facing a deadline for a brief submission, that can be really, really painful.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to have a good version control, the ability to roll back to different versions, track who said what. Yeah. So you can really understand why version control is so important.
Yeah.
I can see. I've not done. I mean, within the context of a law firm, when I was practicing, this didn't exist, and in a small organisation, it's a very different thing to sort of a multi-party team, perhaps multi. So you've got within your own team, and then also obviously with different departments, right? Like this would speed things up in terms of different departments collaborating at the same time rather than having to wait for corporate to hand this to real estate to etc. But I can see how in a very short period of time this can end up becoming a gigantic mess.
Yeah, even such like minutiae as like, can you lock a certain part of the document or the whole document? That's so everybody, you can't save a new version on top of it, or can't edit it anymore. Even stuff like that. With co-authoring, especially, I think you need a lot more control over what happens. Periodic like saving points to different versions than you would before it came along. It's something that would give me a lot of agita, I think, were I still practicing. If people were like, oh, let's all do co-authoring now, I'd be like, all right, but
your face.
Right.
I mean, it's difficult, right? I think the general overarching observation is, sometimes it's important to acknowledge these things. It can be really difficult. It doesn't mean that it's not great. It doesn't mean it doesn't speed things up. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea. But it's really difficult to get it right.
Absolutely.
Jump in if you do use co-authoring, and by all means jump in with. You don't necessarily have to even ask questions. Just jump in with your experiences. It's interesting to hear whether you're finding success with co-authoring, if you're using it, if you're finding success, or if you're finding it a real struggle, and perhaps what you're struggling with. That would be interesting to hear if you have a sec to drop that in the chat. So then your third. Actually, maybe just real quick on the co-authoring. So do you have we're going to talk about future vision. Is there anything that we haven't set out in terms of how things will work or will work better, or do you think we've covered everything in terms of like with our future lens on?
I think there's a broader conversation about really about Outlook, Teams, and Word, but Word in particular in this context, that is not only about the kind of mechanics, things like, to Jen's point, you need to be able to lock things down and say, hey, co-authoring session over, right? Additional controls to be able to manage the work. But also, the document is only a piece, right? You ideally have tools, productivity tools, insight tools that sit within your document management system. And again, if we don't find intelligent ways to bring those into the Word experience, you're back to violating that first rule of, well, now I've got to go back and forth, and I'm, my ability to really parse this goes down. So I think what you'll see broadly, and certainly from us, is a continued expansion of bringing tools. Like, for example, I know we're about to bounce into automation and AI, but let's say I'm using a really fantastic a playbook application that will run a playbook against a document so I can, speed up due diligence, or at least the first round of due diligence. If I have to then bounce back and forth between platforms, wouldn't it just be nicer if that was sitting in a sidebar in Word and I could access it directly from there? Almost every platform has, some sort of AI assistant. Wouldn't it be nice if it was the same assistant sitting there inside Word to kind of help you? Wouldn't it be nice if that assistant had tools that was accessible to it to help me do my work, so that the gap between my experience and the platforms kind of gets blurred? which is a good thing because now it kind of feels like I don't have to decide what chair to sit in. It's all kind of there for me at that point of work when I'm drafting or reviewing.
Yeah, yeah. Like the way you describe it. Yeah, as you say, we're going to come on to automation then. So automating repetitive legal tasks to free up time. What do you mean? So we've talked about, I mean, I've not been in legal tech for as long as some people, but we've talked about automation certainly for a long time. What does this mean to you in terms of this third point within this context?
Yeah, hey Jill, well, talk about some of the range of examples as you're working with customers.
Yeah. So this is like the exciting, sexy stuff that people like to talk about. But a year ago, we were in a different state. People were still sort of questioning whether AI, and now I think it's a very different conversation about how AI, how to implement it, because you're just seeing this like explosion of different things that people are doing, from doing clause comparisons and trying to find like the most relevant clause from a clause bank to apply it to a contract, to generate an issues list and mark it up, all the way to generating first drafts of like motions and briefs. Some people have gotten creative using it to sort of siphon off repetitive emails and run analyses on those by collecting them in a data table on the back end so that you can perform various operations on it. And like a lot of the lower level stuff, I think, has been not solved yet, but definitely done to death, like automating NDAs, for example. I think almost every firm right now has one effort or the other, or has already found a way to automate repetitive, sort of lower level work in terms of like strategic stuff. That is the low hanging fruit is getting struck off so far. And yeah.
And you're not talking within this context. Are we talking about specifically about leveraging Gen AI, or we're talking about using like a multitude of different technology depending on what sort of what task it is you want to do?
Yeah, it's more the latter.
The combination.
Yeah.
It's stock automation with Gen AI. But there's a lot of vendors out there that are basically just an assistant, and for them, it's like mostly Gen AI.
Yeah, I mean and some of this is, we come from a position of privilege of having inbuilt document automation, rules and logic based document and workflow automation. But I like to think you'll often hear us talk about AI and automation, or automation and AI, or automation with AI, because I think, again, in the sort of conversation and even in the evaluation process for firms and departments, it can get very focused on the AI portion, which, by the way, is very exciting. It does open up a lot of opportunity to automate things that traditional rules and logic-based automation platforms haven't been good at, because they're not generators, they're not analysis engines, right? But I mean, managing list sections and complex documents, the like volume of document generation that is more or less, I mean, it's the kind of stuff that people were doing in macros and WordPerfect many years ago, that still exists. And like, do we want generative AI to be, consistently filling in the right figures and doing the calculations to make sure everything adds up? Probably not, at least not at this case. So when we talk about document workflow automation, it's always in that frame of a combination, not two separate systems, but a system that leverages rules and logic and generative capabilities inside one application or one workflow.
Yeah. Sorry, Jen.
The use cases we're seeing are increasingly sophisticated, like compared to a year ago, like automatically, running a red, yellow, green analysis against contracts that need to be renewed. So that's really cutting down like first level review of this type of stuff by like hundreds of hours, and then passing it to like a team of attorneys, like a smaller team that can just kind of like validate what the AI has been doing. We're seeing very sophisticated stuff as well. Like if a firm has a template table that they always fill out for a really complicated document, like a limited partnership agreement that contains 80 different checkpoints, that would take, a junior, mid-level, and then a partner hours, like maybe 10 hours in total, to review each one. Now you can just press a button and it fills out that table for you, like all 80 of them, with very, very sophisticated information, like what's the waterfall distribution, what are the terms of like D&O for insurance and indemnities, that sort of thing. So I think that's like a real common use case that really optimizes reg abilities and everything, and that we see repeating itself. And before there was this hesitancy to sort of trust it, but because people have gotten better at prompting, or you can ask AI to prompt for you, now that I feel like it's kind of even getting to the state where it's better than a human reviewer if you compare like a human reviewer doing this review to model 4.1. Sometimes model 4.1 actually wins. So yeah, it's kind of
I think
exciting and also scary.
Yeah.
No, it's important to always remember that, like in some of the benchmarking exercises, that really has been the thing that's impacted me actually, is that we compare it to 100%. That was, I think, with some of the VALS AI, tests, and that was what hit me most, that actually we need to ditch this idea of the human being 100%. No, that's not what we're here to talk about, but I do think it's a super valid point. But then it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've also got the ability to use AI like AI, Gen AI, you talk about the Gen AI portion, it's not magic. We still need to have tagging, we still need good metadata, we still need good data, but actually people are using AI to do the things that people are bad at, right? So data management and all of that kind of stuff, and applying the metadata in the first place. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's important, none of these learnings or trends are isolated. So, as we've been talking about security because it underpins everything. And again, that how do we relieve folks of the cognitive burden of not just repetitive or low-level tasks, but tasks that people hate doing or aren't as good at as the technology. So it's almost the mirror of, let's not think about click reduction.
Yeah.
But let's think about what are the things that we can drive our ability to deliver impeccable work product and superior client value, because that's really ultimately what matters. And that's not just about how do we automate kind of low-hanging fruit, but sometimes it's like, how do we automate processes that are incredibly important to the organization, but that are a distraction for the lawyer, or that result in bad data that impairs the ability of the organization to manage its own documents and data. The other lens, I think, is some of the really fantastic things that I've seen as examples is a level of sort of strategy and a kind of a business strategy. For example, a large firm was being asked to manage collections for a financial institution, an existing client, and they don't want to do that. The firm didn't want to do it. None of the lawyers were like, "Oh, I'm really excited to change and focus exclusively on collections." That's exactly why I went to law school. But it was an opportunity, and they took it, and to their CTO's credit, really thought about not only how can we make this bearable and minimize the impact on internal resources, so we don't have to hire a bunch of people, but thought about it as a business challenge of, okay, this is an unmet demand for a certain class of financial institution. How do we think about automating processes and packaging that in such a way that we can not only meet the client demand and therefore secure the opportunity by offering competitive fixed rates, but also how do we achieve a multiple on our hourly? How do we stand up an important new revenue center for the firm without saying, now we have to hire 50 people to do collections all day?
Yeah.
Which no one wants to do.
I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing that there's so many new opportunities, in terms of, exactly, either by speeding things up and reducing the amount you have to pay to deliver it, or by packaging it up and offering it as a sort of white label product, or there's so many new opportunities around that, I think.
Yeah, well, even for a smaller firm, any firm that has a cyclical kind of a seasonal workflow, conveyancing firm that has some cyclicality, and you have the challenge of, I have to get 5, 10, 15 case handlers up to speed and productive very, very quickly. Thinking of it less about how do we shave off the low level, but can we think really differently about how we spread that cyclicality so we're not constantly having to be responsive to that, and that combination of traditional logic and rules-based automation and Gen AI can really offer some interesting opportunities there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some firms have been doing this sort of thing for a really long time, haven't they? And it's funny
Yeah.
how, to me, how it has never become like A&O Sherman, for example, for years and years and years, they've been productizing. They've been, they're at the top of the chain in terms of the types of work, but they also have been doing, what might be regarded as lower level work and packaging up and offering this kind of tech enabled and now AI enabled service. It always surprised me that more firms weren't doing that, but I think maybe this is now the opportunity, because this is probably going to open it up to firms that perhaps don't necessarily have that super high level tech team either. I think perhaps this is going to become a slightly more, I don't think democratize is probably the right word in this context actually, but you know what I mean. I think this is going to perhaps open this up to more firms, to the opportunity to start scaling and reducing this sort of routine work in a meaningful way, rather than just perhaps talking about it.
And the expertise necessary to really think through that strategy, that think of it as business transformation strategy, in the most positive sense, is accessible, right? Whether it's we're gonna be very intentional about developing that expertise internally, whether it's about hiring, whether it's about partnering with qualified consultant organizations. I mean, there's a lot of great help. I think one of the challenges is a lot of legal organizations feel like they're starting at square one.
Yeah.
Because they don't have decades of, frankly, what we would call product management expertise, but that expertise is extremely accessible. So I think one of the actions is go talk to some folks that are really, really good at the discipline and science of how do you identify a problem, how do you create a solution, how do you then wrap that up and effectively productize it, whether that's for internal implementation or direct interface with the client, or whatever mode makes sense.
Yeah. And perhaps with the caveat, I mean, I think we've covered this, but that not every, what's the expression about hammer and a nail? Not every nail, like basically think about the right tool for the right use case as well.
100%.
Right. So this is
100%.
something. There's sort of a danger around thinking that everything, like you said, about not everything needs Gen AI.
Right.
Let's talk about going to semantic search. So the sort of fourth point of your checklist is semantic search, which Jen and I have talked a little bit about. We've kind of trailed semantic search for a little while, and it's exciting, but it's also presents challenges, right? So I think it would be great to chat through where we're at now and perhaps understand why this is number 4 on the list, and then perhaps some of the considerations that people need to be thinking about right now.
Yeah, so a lot of times we'll be kind of showing people, hey, here's what you can do, here's an app you can run to accomplish that, and they're like, that's great. What I really need is to be able to hop into my search bar, search my entire DMS, find the perfect precedent, and then take clauses or language from that and put it into something new. Can you do that? And you're like, so everybody, whether they know it or not, has been asking for what we call semantic search, or, rightfully, I think we're moving away towards that and calling it AI search right now. But that ability to really trawl the depths of all this accumulated rich content that you have on your document management system. That's a feature that will be coming soon for us, and that everybody really wants. I kind of call it the holy grail, because as a lawyer, maybe not if you're a partner, but even so, if you're a partner, you're spending a lot of your day looking for the right language that has been previously drafted by you or somebody else. And, it's an inefficient process. Sometimes you don't get the best. And sometimes you miss something, but now you're really going to be able to do that with AI search, much as if on Google right now, when you ask it something in natural language, it'll return results to you in relevance, in the relevancy border. And you don't have to worry about Booleans or the accuracy of your search terms. You'll be able to do that on your DMS, but more importantly, you'll also be able to ask questions, kind of like you do on Google right now, and get a response. So, for example, if you ask, what's the current composition of Acme Board Co., it will actually go through the documents, find the relevant organizational documents where that's laid out, the board minutes and everything, and then give you an answer with links to those documents that it drew that answer from. So I think that's a real game changer and super exciting.
Yeah, and again, it's that kind of core experience of, I mean, well, first of all, you have to have, you have to have impeccable lexical search. Ideally, you have a robust ontology that's consistently, accurately, and completely applied appropriately to every document, which we should probably talk about in this frame as well. Because sometimes you really do want and need that process of I'm actually trying to find a document and I want to find the right document. But to Jen's point, sometimes I just want the answer. And yes, I absolutely can refine my search terms, weed out the document types that aren't relevant, et cetera, to get down into a manageable universe where I only have to read 5 or 10 documents to get the answer as opposed to 50 or 100. But that's still a lot of time and a lot of preparatory work when what I really want to do is be able to provide my partner with the answer or make a decision on the basis of the information encoded in my repository, so that getting to the answer quicker is really about how do we keep the process moving? How do we have lawyers spend less time kind of working the system and more time evaluating the intelligence and making good decisions or applying it to the next task at hand?
Yeah, and it's this AI search, I think, is really going to be that foundational layer that everything sort of starts from. So imagine you say, give me the 5 contracts that contain a material adverse effect clause that are in like the social media industry that we've done in the past 5 years for this particular partner. It then surfaces those exact 5 agreements for you. You can then easily select them, hop into the assistant, interrogate them to make sure that that clause is exactly the way you want it to, maybe even draft a net new clause. And the vision here at NetDocs is one day that you'd be able to then either use our automatic markup tool to sort of insert that new language into whatever draft you're marking up, or trigger an app using the assistant that would then perform a workflow for you, like mark up an entirely new document with that language as well as the playbook that you've come up with before. So really that like seamless experience, reducing the clicks per minute that a lawyer has to do and the toggle tax that really allows you to do your workflow really efficiently with a high degree of precision and accuracy. So, I always think of it as like sort of AI augmented lawyers, but that's really the state and the vision that we're moving towards.
I think it's exciting, but I also feel like so there are 2 things that spring to my mind. One is the example that you gave is a great one, because that's a kind of, you want the corpus of data on that particular that you've done for that. My concern might be for somebody who might be looking for a precedent or something, and they might find something which is out of date, or they might find something, that teams work super hard on their knowledge bank, and I worry about over dramatizing it, but I think about the kind of risks of surfacing data which might not be the right data, and how you ensure, how you ward against that, how you make sure that what they access is correct, etc. And then the second point, which we'll come on to, I also think it's super important. We're going to come on to talk about security and governance.
Yeah.
But obviously, surfacing stuff that they shouldn't see. That's the other point. But yes, but in terms of the kind of, not version control, but the accuracy, surfacing the right information, surfacing the most up to date, surfacing the information that the firm wants you to surface. Does this? What do you say about that sort of issue?
Yeah, practically speaking, like even when AI search is enabled, all the permissions, controls, ethical walls will still be present for the documents, so you can't access something that you weren't meant to access. And I don't think it really changes, because like before, people were just using the search bar and using pure lexical search to surface precedents, right? You still had that danger that the content was stale or not appropriate. As a lawyer, that is your job to go in and make sure maybe check with the team that that's like the latest draft. But you still have stuff where you can like make this the official version. We even have like subversioning available where you can put in comments and say 3.4 is the one that you want to use. Ignore 3.5 because that was like for a very like tiny specific thing that's only pertaining to this deal. But if you're using this as a model, like go to the previous version. Those are the things that the lawyer has to pay attention to. But you know, it's not so different from when you're surfacing precedents using a normal search. Like you'll still have to control for that.
Yeah. Well, and we're not talking about a switch from really robust lexical search to a new mode. It's more additive, and so you have greater degrees of freedom and greater choice. So let's say, give me the 5 most recent, and then I know it's in there somewhere, but isn't one of the 5 most recent. So I could amend my search to say look a little bit further back, or I could open up an advanced search pane and actually define a date window and say, I don't want anything that's older than XYZ or more recent than this. So having all of that sort of robust search functionality that lawyers use every day, sitting alongside that faster path to getting from, I have a question, I just want the answer so I can do the next thing or move forward, really expands what's possible and makes the experience more intuitive without saying now suddenly you have to search in a different way. Because why go through that disruption?
Really, the challenge is getting people to save stuff. The same
Getting people to
challenge
save
we've
stuff?
had since the beginning is getting them to save it to the DM. But I think with all these tools and all this AI stuff, that's only really possible now if you have content stored in the right place. Like hopefully it's a
Yes.
carrot to get people to actually use the DMS or whatever system of record you set up, so that you can really enable this sort of firm-wide collaboration and leveraging of work that other people have already done.
And accurate and complete and consistent application of metadata is essential for lexical search. It's essential for security. And I think we talked a little bit about it's been out in our platform for a while, and there are others who have different versions. But the ability to automatically profile as part of document creation or revision is really great from a lawyer perspective. It's one less thing that I hate doing that I don't have to do. But for the folks, for KM leaders, for CIOs, I think the most exciting thing about it is that we can stop thinking about how we tag, how we apply metadata to our documents in the frame of what can we get a busy lawyer to do in a minimal amount of time, and start thinking about, well, maybe we want 50 profile attributes. Maybe we want a lot of complex, unlimited, nested, conditional metadata, because that will drive better experience, it'll drive better lexical search, it'll drive better, more granular security. Because the system can do that. The system doesn't get tired or distracted or need an extra cup of coffee and then forget where they left off and then just mark administrative or miscellaneous for the document type. That's super duper exciting stuff. And again, another question that folks should be asking is, okay, what's the metadata management regime? How can AI be used to not only relieve users of that burden, but really transform the way that we think about metadata and kind of elevate a lot of different areas that are of concern, including productivity, search accuracy, and security.
I agree. So super exciting. Sorry, Jen.
I was just going to say, by the way, like when AI search becomes available, the first step is you have to semantically index all the documents on the DMS. And that is different, I think, but sort of similar exercise to some of the other cool things you can do with AI, such as auto profiling. So I wonder if it could do it concurrently, but like while you're doing it, you might as well get all those metadata fields filled out with a background application, and that'll make the semantic search when it goes live even better and faster and more accurate and cool.
Absolutely.
So, I agree. Super exciting. So security and governance. So that's your 5th point. We've touched on it a little bit actually. So although we have not got a huge amount of time left, so we've kind of touched on it here and there. And you've said, obviously that in terms of the search that you've just mentioned, it will respect permissioning. So we've kind of covered that, which is super important. I think there's also factors around to consider around data retention, which I think firms are being much more astute about. Although I've spoken to a lot of people that there's still quite a lot of challenges around that area, certainly not simple, and also client data. So that's another big factor to consider, right? So I think those two things, we've got sort of just a few more minutes. But and perhaps also maybe thirdly, it sounds so obvious, but verifying the vendors. We talked about the point solutions. We talked about the fact that there's a lot of new entrants. Don't necessarily trust but verify.
Just but verify.
That's an awful lot of information and topics for a short period of time. But is there anything you want to elaborate on in the sort of few minutes we've got left?
Yeah, I can give a quick bullet point and then reserve the last word for Jen. So don't be satisfied with your documents and data are used to train the model. Everyone says that. It's probably true for everyone, but that's insufficient. So what you should be asking any vendor who has any AI capability is, do you have an exemption to data retention with the large language model? Otherwise, your data could be sitting in someone else's server. And obviously that's risky. Is both the input and output to the large language model exempt from oversight and abuse prevention? Is there an algorithm that's going to watch it and say, oh, you're talking about a thing that I don't like, therefore I might flag it to an employee of that LLM provider, like Microsoft or Google or whoever? Absolutely. It makes perfect sense for most industries. For legal, it makes no sense. Make absolutely certain that exemption is in place. Otherwise, I would say it's a non-starter. Make sure when you're asking about respecting access controls and ethical walls that it's not just use case specific or application specific, but that you're asking that question about every interaction that involves AI. So someone will show you, oh, we have this cool, templated thing. It's like, okay, walk me through the access controls and show me how it respects those. Oh, we have an assistant, because there's so many ways that unintentionally loopholes can be created that can enable someone to access something they shouldn't. Be really rigorous on that point. Any vendor should be able to answer very specifically how that is done, and ideally it should be documented in a trust center somewhere. Yeah, I think that was the quick hit.
No, that's great. You're quicker than we need to be, but yeah, Jen.
No comments. I'm just kidding. I think I've covered it. I don't know if I can top that. Just a closing comment in general, in that I think, capitalism is such a cool economy, because even in 1 year later, just the competitiveness has driven these tools to even greater lengths. And I think a year from now, our talk track is going to be entirely different, and things will have changed significantly and meaningfully even by then. I feel like we're in the second coming of the internet. So I think everybody should stay tuned. And also, if everything we're talking about sounds super mysterious, I'd say get your feet wet now, so that it's really easy, I think, now to fall behind than even a year ago. So staying abreast of this, I think, becomes actually critical towards maintaining your competitive edge as a lawyer and in practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And keeping your, it sounds so easy, but keeping your head, doing your job in the way that this out. Again, I keep saying things which sound a little bit patronizing, and I don't mean it to be, but I feel like we've kind of reached a point, a sort of plateau where there's a lot of progress, there's a lot of amazing use cases, there's a lot of knowledge sharing. It's super exciting, and it's just about remembering those first principles of how we do our jobs, how we implement new technology, how we do it. We've done this for a really long time, actually this is new, but it's also not new. We need to carry on talking about adoption and security and governance and these are principles that we've talked about for years, and we need to continue to keep our heads and to keep on doing our jobs in the way that we know how to do them and we're the experts at. And I don't refer to myself in that, but that in terms of the listeners, they are expert, you're expert, do your job and continue to do it, and have that culture of curiosity at the same time, and I think that there's a lot of exciting progress. This is going to be another huge year, and it's so great to hear these points from you guys. Thank you. I love this masterclass concept. It's so great to do these deep dives. I really appreciate you making the time to go through these points. Thank you so much to people listening in, for joining us from all over the globe. And thank you so much. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Caroline. Pleasure as always.
Michael, Jen, thank you.
Thank you.